Welcome on my first step ever. I'm always excited because this particular podcast is really hunting those amazing stories that have got that particular essence that the youth or the disruptors across the globe really need to know, that you need to follow your own gut feeling, your intuitions, or the dream or the aspiration, whatever you call it, and do not give up. And I think the part of giving up happens when you do not have conviction in that and you don't take steps to get to it. Whatever your path may be, it may be quicker for you, it may not be quicker for you, it could be different for everyone else, to each their own. But sticking to what you really want or align with, that is what makes your journey unique. And today I'm so excited that we have someone who has made his journey a very, very unique journey, from being in different professions to actually culminating that, and now he is doing a really impactful work, and we will get to that. But before that, please join your hands if you're there, or maybe just hoot in your own head, and welcome Matt Young all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Hi Matt, welcome on my first step ever.
Hey Ishani, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's the pleasure is completely mine. Let me give a little bit of sneak peek about you to our listeners today, whoever is watching us or listening from all across the globe. So Matt is an award-winning teacher, performer, producer of improv comedy. Now, if that rings a bell, I know that this gets things really interesting. Everyone likes stand-up comedy, and he is into improv comedy. So people who are into stand-up, who are in comedy, they would know that improv comedy is one of the most challenging, in my understanding, and also the most funniest. I feel I just seen one, so I can say that. So that means that we are dealing with someone really creative and very intelligent. Okay, I hope my questions are intelligent. And he is, as I said, he's based in Melbourne. He has helped hundreds of awkward nerds unlock their creativity and confidence. You can definitely find a bit more about Matt at the Improv Conspiracy Theater, and you can learn more about him. I will leave everything in the show notes. But when we have the man himself over here, let's ask some questions.
Yeah.
So, Matt, let's go to the very beginning of your childhood. Please tell us, how was your childhood? Who were the kind of people that you were surrounded with? What was their mindset?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I grew up in Tasmania, Australia, so down south a bit further. And down there, my mum is a teacher and my dad is a bricklayer. So I've been surrounded by sort of education for my entire life, which has been really lovely from my mother. There's always been, a huge emphasis on learning and creating. I only sort of really realized in my early 20s that my dad was kind of more the creative one in the family. It didn't really click for me. I thought he was, very practical. But I mean, the guy builds houses out of nothing. So, he's a real handyman. He can turn his hand to any task. So there was always a real sense of creativity and learning from both of my parents. And I went through primary school. My mum taught me for 2 of those years. So I had a really, really close relationship with her in terms of education. And I was, hanging out with all of the other children of teachers. All the parties that my parents would host on the weekend would be just teachers and teachers and teachers. And me and the kids would get up to mischief. So there was sort of, we were surrounded by like sort of authority, but also seeing the fun side of authority and learning to break those boundaries and that kind of thing. Yeah, there was a lot of freedom in my childhood, I'd say, but also a lot of encouragement to do what you want to do, learn what you want to learn, follow your interests, follow your passions, all that sort of stuff. That was huge for me back in the day.
I'm so glad that you had that kind of upbringing.
Yeah, I was very lucky. Like, there's no two ways about it. I'm incredibly, incredibly lucky.
Yeah, because I'm no ways trying to fish any sort of those sad sob stories in your childhood. But I do understand, that when we are growing up, the environment really, really affects us in many ways, and that we come to know when we are in our 20s, when we make sense of things. So as I can see, that you mentioned that you had a really creative dad over there and a really, really intelligent mom over there.
Yeah.
You've got a really good combination. What if I may ask, what was the top one thing that really inspired you, or you were in awe of, both from your mother and your father, that really you loved that particular thing about them?
Yeah, and this is another thing that really came into clarity in my 20s, and I realized how useful and important it was. It's not really one incident, it's actually one incident that was repeated thousands of times. So every single night before I went to bed, my mum would ask me and my sister, she would say, what's the best thing that happened today? She would say, what's your best thing? That, just what's your bestie? That was all she had to say after, 5-10 years or whatever. Every single night she'd ask that. So we would always go to bed thinking about, what are we grateful for? Like, what are we happy about? What was the best thing that happened today? What did you, and it might have been dinner was really yummy, or it might have been hanging out with my friends was really good, or I learned this really cool new thing. So having that kind of inculcated into you every single night for years upon years, and you don't realize at the time. I just thought it was a routine. I thought everyone's mum did it, and it wasn't until I was in my 20s, and it wasn't until I think I was like 23, and people were sort of pointed out. I'd had enough people tell me how cheerful I was and, how optimistic and all this sort of stuff. And I kind of look back on it and I was like, I think that is definitely like a core part of it. That's got to have had a big impact.
I think what she was doing was definitely, creating a sense of gratefulness in both of you. And that's such an unique technique, because every day if someone asks you, what is the best thing that happened, then your focus, your attention kind of shifts to that thing, and you want to give an answer, because that's what we want to do. We want to give an answer.
I mean, I can guarantee there wasn't a single night where I didn't have an answer. I could be, even if I was in an awful mood, like there's still, even on your worst day, there's still a best thing that happened. There's always still one thing that stood out from the rest, even on the worst possible day. She told me recently that she's still a teacher, so she's a principal at a school, and she told some other teachers about this, and they said, I've started doing this with my kids as well. And this other teacher said, before they go to bed, I ask them what their best thing for the day was, and ask them what their worst thing was as well. And Mum's just like, no, you've missed the point. The idea is the idea is to go to bed with the last thing on your mind is like the best thing that happened, and then you dream about that, you think about that in bed, like that's where all the it all sort of the seeds sink in. So I'm glad that she always focused on the besties. I thought that was nice.
Okay, thanks so much for Matt's mum today.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Everyone who's listening to us, for the ones who have had a similar kind of upbringing, congratulations. I'm sure you're smiling somewhere. And for the ones who are really wanting to see that kind of upbringing happening for them, or maybe it's not, I think that this is the time that you kind of embrace with whatever that you have, because even that is very, very important. Having parents around, having a family around, that's important. And now that you know what is the trick to kind of tell your mind that this is good, so now you can start applying that in your life. What's in the past, and actually you can apply this with your parents as well. And maybe when you become parents, you can do that. So let's always try and see that what we can make better from today. As Matt's mom, Miss Kathy, has told us, this is a technique that you can try. So Matt, from here, while you were in your teenage years, you were growing up, it's a very normal feeling, because then you start trying to question a lot of things in life, and as you get to your adulthood, like maybe early 20s, we are all trying to find ourselves, because that's when, like, I'm an adult, or I'm becoming an adult, and I need to know who I am, what I'm doing in my life. Maybe in your case, you might have already understood who you are, what kind of person you are, but did you ever encounter any sort of situation where you were mentally not very happy about things, or questioning things? If yes, how did you deal with that?
I mean, look, I know I put out quite a positive vibe and all that sort of stuff, and I'm very lucky to have been brought up in that environment. But still, like every teenager and every young adult, I was also very moody and uncertain of trying to make sense of the world, or that kind of thing. I think in many ways, like, my teenage rebellion was I was like a big emo kid. I was very all in my feelings about all kinds of different things. But I think the big change for me was when I finished high school. So through high school, I did all sorts of different subjects, loved all of them, and I did a pretty good job at school. But the school I was at, the general idea was just the culture there was, look, you get good grades, you're going to become a lawyer or a doctor, and I'm too squeamish. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't do science. So after I finished school, I went and started a law degree. Mm-hmm. And pretty much all of my friends moved to Melbourne. So it's a pretty standard rite of passage you move from Tasmania up to Melbourne. Yep. But all my friends did that straight out of high school. So I was like suddenly very alone, and I was studying this thing that I didn't really care that much about, but I was just kind of doing it because I felt like I was meant to do it, and to not do it would be like a waste of what I'd achieved, kind of. So I did that for about a year, and I hated it. I got very, very isolated, very introverted, more introverted than I am normally. And I retreated a lot from my friends and family. I was making a lot of bad choices. And by the end of it, I just decided I decided I'm going to drop out of this degree. And it was absolutely the right choice for me. I told my mum in a car ride one time, and she just said she completely understood. She was incredibly supportive of that, which was lovely. But then there was kind of a period where I still had no idea what I was doing. So I was kind of just flailing around, and if anything, getting a bit worse. And then eventually one day she sat me down and she told me in her, trademark forthright but kind way, just pretty expressly just told me, you're not utilizing all your potential. Which is a weird thing to hear as a young adult. You're like,
That's very nice of her to say that, sit you down and say that.
yeah, it was very nice, but I think she caught me in quite a fragile state as well.
Yeah,
So
that I understand. Your part, your story is a different part. I understand.
Yeah. But it was. I mean, it made me sort of go, "What? I have potential." Like that was quite nice. Like I don't think I thought about that for a long time, and then thinking about that, I was wasting. I was like, "Well, what do I want to do? Like, what the hell? What the hell do I do?"
Then, yeah, you get in that questioning zone and in the rabbit hole. Oh, really? If I do have potential, then what am I doing on earth?
Yeah.
Am I that bad that I can even find the potential within myself?
But it was the kickstart I needed to actually start thinking about it. And then, over the next couple of months, I started. I got really into. I was always interested in comedy, and I always really loved comedy and entertaining and performing, all that kind of stuff. And I read somewhere that Jerry Seinfeld meditated, and I thought that was really interesting. And I briefly learned to meditate in high school in a religious studies class, and I adored it then. I thought it was so cool, but I never thought about it again. But then at this point in my life, I sat down and I started just sort of off my own back, just with some stuff I Googled, and started trying to meditate. And it had just a profound impact. And I really started listening to my internal voice, I guess, and recognizing that I had been retreating away from people, or I hadn't been moving towards things that I loved doing, and hadn't been pushing myself to do the stuff that maybe I loved when I was in high school or when I was a kid. And that was really, I think, the combination of things that pushed me towards kind of moving into comedy and actually seeing what I could do.
Firstly, thank you so much for being so honest.
Oh, happily.
For opening up, because I believe that our listeners, from all across the world, wherever they are, whatever situation they are in, when we open up, they can find themselves somewhere in our guest speaker's journey or the story or the feelings that they have gone through. And it also gives us a feeling, that it's okay to be in the position that we are mentally or maybe physically. But what is more important is actually either to sit down with yourself, question yourself, or not even question, but maybe try to understand your own feelings.
Listen to yourself,
that,
I think.
yes, yeah, for sure. And if that's not something that you're able to do, then please confide in someone that you really feel can, help you. In any way, you need to let that out. That is the most important thing for you to happen, for you to move ahead from that situation. So I think that was very beautifully, I think in your journey, it was your mom sitting you down and, pointing that out. Hey, you are a rock star. What are you doing under the rock?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. I hadn't thought of it that way.
I don't know how my comedy is going over there because I'm very bad at that.
No, that's good stuff.
I'm trying. So I believe that's how your journey started. You were definitely listening to your heart, your mind, and you were taking actions. But the beginnings of anything is not that simple. It's not that easy. I would like you to, take us through the first steps of actually getting into this profession, because however interesting, amazing it seems, it is a very competitive space, to be really honest. And being an artist, it's quite subjective because not everyone can relate with you, with the way, in the sense, your art. So people come from different backgrounds, from different experiences. How did the entire process actually take for you to become an improv comedian?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite lengthy. I mean, this is very much only the start. It's the first step. So all through high school, I was a very big, like a theater nerd. I was always loved drama class, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I was a big old theater nerd. I loved theater, and every year, me and a bunch of my friends, we all did theater together. And every single year, there's a competition in Australia called Raw Comedy. No, Class Clowns. Sorry, Class Clowns is So there's Raw Comedy, which is like an annual stand-up comedy competition, and then there's Class Clowns, which is like the youth division, basically.
Amazing.
And all through high school, every single year, we would be like, let's do Class Clowns, let's do Class Clowns. And every single year, it would get to the day before. We'd always sign up, and every single year, the day before, we would all be like, hey, we doing Class Clowns tomorrow? And everyone would be like, I haven't written anything. We're not doing it. And we were too nervous and couldn't think of anything and didn't end up doing it. But then I've dropped out of uni, and I'm getting in touch with myself a bit better, and I've been told I need to figure out my potential and all that kind of thing. And I remembered that, and I Googled it, and I was like, can I still do Class Clowns? And it cuts off at 18, and by this point I'm 19 and a half or so. But then they link you to Raw, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just do this. I'll sign up. And it was the signing up. I would say the signing up was my first step. And I think by the time I had gotten to the point that I was at there, it wasn't even a question. Like it wasn't, I don't even know if there was a sign up fee or anything like that. It was just, I put my name in the bucket. I was like, I've got to do this. I'm not doing anything else. I've wanted to do this for a long time. This is a dream that's gone unacknowledged for a long time. I've got to try it. And I did. And I had gotten some work as a teaching assistant. So like just in primary schools, I was following my mum's footsteps. I was just helping out in schools.
That's lovely.
And I just sat down and wrote, and kids do funny stuff every day. So I was just sort of putting together some of the stuff that had happened with them, and how I felt about it. And I'm really tall, so I'm really tall, and there's all these short children, and there was jokes there. So I'm just putting all the pieces together, and I ended up with 5 minutes of material. And I went along on the night, and I didn't know anyone else there. I hadn't done any other gigs up till this. This was my first ever stand-up gig. I was scared, but like excited. It was like I was thrilled. This was something that I'd wanted to do for a long time. And the venue happened to be a venue where one of my favorite comedians had performed like a year ago. So, I was like, this is going to be awesome.
Amazing.
And and I got on stage, and as soon as I got on stage, you look out and the lights are like right in your eyes, so you cannot see anyone. And I could see that it was a full house, but I couldn't see a single, like off stage, I could see it was a full house. But once I was on stage, I was like, I don't know who's here, what's happening. But I didn't invite anyone. I didn't want any of my family and friends to come. I just wanted to do it without get it done. But then I said my first punchline, and the crowd just erupted, and I have never looked back. It was the most incredible feeling. And I got through to the next round of that competition, and then that's in the Tasmanian category. You go straight to like the state final there. So I did the state final, and I came runner up in the state final, and that was my second ever stand-up gig. And I would have loved to have won it, but to have come runner up, having done 2 gigs, I was pretty happy with that.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, and then from then on, I just kept performing around Tasmania, and then eventually I ran my own comedy room for a little while. I toured up to Launceston or up to Tasmania, and then moved to Melbourne, I think a year and a half later. So, and that's just the first step.
Yeah. And I actually want to kind of take us all, everyone watching, listening us right now, because I know for a lot of us, because you have just now mastered a skill that is extremely frightening for the 98% population in this world, which is a stage fright, speaking on stage, public speaking. So let us go back to the very beginning of your show on that day, just before you're entering the stage or just backstage about to enter. What is going in your mind? What were you feeling at that point in time, and how did you make yourself, give yourself that courage that just go on the stage right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I'm quite lucky. I've been conditioned for a long time. I've been, doing school plays in primary school, so I've always enjoyed being on stage, but you still get nervous, and you still get frightened, and you're not sure how it's going to go. And especially with stand-up, where you've sort of like sat alone and written these things and been like, I think this is funny, and you don't know if everyone's going to agree with you. It's incredibly daunting. But the thing I tell myself, and I tell this to all of my improv students nowadays as well, is kind of what you just said there, which is that public speaking is like pretty much the number one biggest fear in the world. So as soon as you get on stage, you've already impressed 98% of the audience. Like just by standing on stage, people are like, "Whoa, that's amazing." So if you can talk while you're doing that, you're going to blow their minds. So, and I always tell that to improv students and stuff, and I genuinely think it's true. I maybe it's just something that it helps me, so I believe it. But I truly think that just being up there and being able to look like you want to be there, I think that gives, if you look confident, the audience believes you're confident, because the audience doesn't want to see you bomb. The audience doesn't want to see you have a bad time. The audience came to watch good comedy. The audience came to watch a good public speech or whatever. They didn't come to see someone brick it. So if you go up there and you really do just have to like go into that zone and try to do it. And it takes a lot of practice and takes a lot of time. And again, I've been very lucky doing it a lot of my life. So now that I do it very often, I find it a lot easier. But you just got to get started. Like, otherwise you'll never have that stage confidence to be able to actually do it again and again.
Thanks for sharing that, Matt. And I think you mentioned something about that you were conditioned from the very beginning of your growing up, that how to sort of deal with certain kind of situations where you're putting yourself out there. And I'm really a big sucker for a good story, good inspiring story. So I'm going to ask you a question over here. As you teach a lot of your students improv comedy, or maybe just being on the stage, that comes with it. Tell us one story of that one kid who was the most frightened so far in your career, and how did you help that particular kid? Because I know everyone who's listening to us they're gonna relate to it if they're in the situation, and you telling us that story, the process, will really help them as well.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm trying to think of a specific person. I know there was one guy a few years ago who he was really, really keen, and really had a real passion for comedy. So I teach adults 99% of the time. That's or people from 18.
That's even harder, I feel.
Well, I mean, I have tried to teach improv to children, and that is nearly impossible because children are improvising constantly. So
yes. Oh yes.
they're already. All you're trying to teach the adults is how to act like children. So so kids are hard to wrangle like that. But
I take my words back.
But with adults, you get sometimes people who come in, and I can think of one in particular who came in. He was really, really interested in comedy, really loved comedy, obsessed with it, wanted it so bad, but for whatever reason, you could tell he was very, very anxious and very uncomfortable. And I could tell in conversation with him, like when he was off stage and just having a chat, he was having very, very funny ideas. He was a funny, affable guy. Like you put him on stage and it was just nothing was happening. And I teach 8-week courses, and I think I don't know if I could just explain one thing that you do. Again, it's like the bestie thing, like it's one incident repeated 1,000 times. But I think just showing that one of the big things we teach in improv is that the next best thing to being interesting is being interested. So if you can show interest on stage and show curiosity for the other person, that is a really valuable thing in a scene. But also I think as a teacher, I think it works that way as well. I think showing interest in your students and being curious about them and getting them to come out of their shell and expose more of themselves and their personality, it helps unlock some of those little bits and little blocks in them that allow them to get on stage and be authentic. Because we're not looking for people who are trying really, really hard. And I don't think there are certain cases where we do like that, like at the Olympics, I guess, but we actually don't. A lot of the time we can smell it when someone's trying really hard, and you can cut this if this is crass, but we often say comedy is like a fart. If you have to force it, it's probably shit. So
that's true.
So we try to make sure people are just kind of moving loosely and freely and they're just expressing themselves. And I think by showing interest in my students over the course of those 8 weeks, and especially with this guy, and just learning about him and talking to him and learning about his life and his interests and the things that he finds amusing, gradually erodes those blocks and lets them just have faith that they're just going to be okay up there, and they don't have to try and think of a joke. They can just say what they think. And that's improvising. Like that's not planning. That's discovery. It's more creative that way.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, those are some really insightful tips for anyone who is wanting to kind of either get into improv comedy or get into any profession which really involves a lot of public speaking or performance based work. And even if it's not public speaking, this point in time in the world out there, everyone needs to be present out there, be visible, be able to present themselves in a certain way. So I think it's quite interesting what you mentioned. How I can put this ahead for our listeners is that if you're going in a meeting or if you're going to chat with someone, if there's a coffee catch up, or there's anything where there's other person involved and you're very, very shy and you are very, you don't know what to, begin with.
Yeah.
This is a really good point that Matt made, that try and find about the interest of the other people, like casual conversation. And once you start, talking about the interest, what other person is interested in, they'll start talking very easily and the conversation starts flowing. So yeah, Matt, that's quite interesting. Thank you so much. And from moving out from here, it's been such a great journey, that we've almost covered a lot of so far, a lot of aspects of you getting into this comedy space and being the amazing teacher that you are and being the award winning teacher performer. But let's face another very important aspect of any key performer's life, which is when you are at the peak, or when you're at least you have made the first, you had a first breakthrough. It is very challenging to sustain that and also grow from there. After the first steps that you've taken in your career so far, what has been the top three learnings for you in terms of sustaining yourself in the way that you are right now?
Yeah, wow. Top three learnings. I'll tell you a story first.
Amazing, love the
So
story.
I would say the peak of like when I was doing stand up. I think I moved to Melbourne and I did stand up over here for a number of years, and I performed a lot of different places with a lot of different people. And I ran my own comedy room over here that was really really fun. And eventually, I decided to take another sort of leap, and I put on my own show at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Did an hour-long show, and normally people do like they do some split bills or they do some shorter shows to sort of warm into it. But I just went straight for an hour, and I wrote the whole thing the night before I had to go on. It was 10 nights of shows. It was very very silly. I had a bunch of my friends come. It was quite successful. Like I was, but on paper, it went really well. And I would say that was probably like the peak at that time. That was my absolute tip top. But within 2 weeks of doing that show, I got very, very depressed. I got super depressed about how, one, I think it was just a come down from how exciting the festival was.
Hmm.
But two, I had a real sense that what I had done on stage and what I had written was not authentic. And I thought it was not an accurate portrayal of who I saw myself to be. I didn't agree with some of the stuff I'd said on stage, and it had been filmed, it was online. Like I felt, and you had this sort of dissonance between what I had portrayed and who I wanted to be, kind of. So that was when I started doing improv. So a couple of months after that, or a couple of weeks after that, I really turned down the amount of stand up I was doing, and I started taking improv comedy classes instead. And immediately, I fell in love with it, because with stand up, you're alone, and you write by yourself, and you hope that it's good, and then you get up, and the audience tells you if it's good or not. And
Mm.
with improv, it's pure collaboration. You are with a group of
Yeah.
people. You win together, you lose together. If you make something up on the night and it doesn't work, don't worry, you never have to do it again. It's all over. So I think for me, in terms of the tips and the things I learned from that, because once I started doing that, I've never stopped. There has never been a moment where I've wanted to stop doing improv. It is like my absolute number one joy in life. So I think the things I've learned, in order to sustain any sort of effort or any sort of momentum, you need to have a community. You need to have a group of friends around you and a group of like-minded people, and people who are going to support you and people who are going to celebrate with you and commiserate with you. You need to, I think it's very important to take what you do kind of lightly, to know that it's better. The best way to have good ideas is to have many ideas. So if you do a lot of
Wow.
stuff, a few good ones are going to slip through. So if you can treat your work as not, I don't want to use the word disposable because that sounds kind of negative, but if you can treat it as sort of disposable, you feel less attachment to it, and you can kind of just push through and do it. If one fails, you do another one. If one fails, you do another one. If there's a success, you do another one, kind of like that. Like you learn and learn, and you compound the effect that way. So I think community, that sort of consistency, and just, I'm not sure what the third thing is, but I guess it's
But that's
just,
all good.
that's all good. I'm just because there's 1,000, Ishani. There's so many
I
things I've learned. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
I think thank you again, for opening up, being so candid, because it is very important in a journey as we're growing up that we also sometimes sit and audit our own feelings, our own behavior with what we are portraying, and because everyone has an image out there,
Mm.
and the more authentic it is, it's best for us, because then we attract those kind of people, those kind of work opportunities, and we are in that circle that we want to be in. So thank you so much, Matt, for being on my first step ever, taking us through your such an amazing journey. And I like to say that you just got lucky that you do improv comedy, because if it was not for that, I would have asked you to crack some jokes for my audience. Now that I can't, because it's a group thing, I can't really help you with that. So that's okay, but
That's
I
all right.
will
You
definitely.
can come down here sometime. We'll make it work. We'll do two prov.
Okay,
It'll be great.
done. Whenever I'm down, I'll let you know about that. So, Matt, just before we let you go today, a very quick question to you. Please tell us that what we have been talking about, that what you're doing, but if you can maybe quickly let our listeners know that what you're doing at this point in time with your own business, who you help, and if they like to reach you, how they can reach you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as Ishani said, I help awkward nerds unlock their creativity and confidence. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Search up Matt Young on LinkedIn. You can go to mattyoung.com.au. I'm on Instagram, mattyoung_au. You can find me at the Improv Conspiracy Theatre in Melbourne. I perform there at least once a month as a team called Cool and Smart. And also there's a festival coming up at the theatre in August called the
Okay.
Defrost Festival. It's the biggest improv festival in the Southern Hemisphere. So if you want to go to that, I'm sure I'll see you there. But yeah, Matt Young, and you can find everything that way.
Awesome. So that is Matt Young for you. And to all my listeners out there, before we wrap up today, I'm going to request Matt to leave our listeners with a quote or a saying that he really resonates with.
Sure. My favorite quote of all time is by a Lebanese poet named Khalil Gibran. He wrote a book called The Prophet, a book of poetry. And when asked what the main message of the book was, he said, "You are far greater than you know, and all is well." And that is my favorite quote.
Wow, that sounds really nice. You're far greater than you know, and all is well. Amazing. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining our virtual studios of My First Step Ever and sharing your journey in such a candid way. I absolutely love chatting with you and getting to know you even more. And I would, whenever I'm down in Melbourne, I'm going to try and see if I can get a seat in one of your shows. If that's
Absolutely,
okay.
yeah.
Awesome. So, to my listeners out there, I know that you've really enjoyed this, and this has somewhere also kind of helped you see through maybe a different profession for yourself if you are in that side already, but you were still wondering, what can I do with my own talents? Probably this is something that you might want to, venture about. So, if you're interested, do get in touch with Matt. And until then, for all my listeners, as I always say, start believing in yourself and keep believing in yourself. See you.